Tim Collins, we're coming today. I'm with Attorney General Steve Marshall. He's the Attorney General for the entire state of Alabama. We're at Cullman Regional Medical Center. Steve, you had a big meeting with the higher ranks of the hospital on opioids and your work trying to bring that into some kind of balance in the state of Alabama. Can you talk about it?
Yeah, I think what we're continuing to try to do is develop facts and hear opinions and impressions for those that are impacted by the question that we're dealing with in the state about opioids. You know, we hear continually from medical providers certain information that they believe that is relevant for us to know and how it is that we deal with the situation in the state. And when we're talking about opioids, we're really talking about, what we're facing with overdose deaths that are attributable to somebody that's either using an opioid or heroin or fentanyl. And also talking about how it is that when we are, as a state, the number one per capita with opioid prescriptions, how it is that we address that issue, because obviously we're not sicker than other folks, we're not hurt more, but there's something going on here that we can't necessarily tell you that we have the answer for yet as to why that data exists. And so this is about saving lives and still doing pain management and patient care appropriately and making sure that it makes sense in Alabama, not just an Alabama question, but also a national one. And so the opportunity today to sit down with doctors and nurses and hospital administrators is really something to allow me not necessarily to talk as much as to be able to listen and take notes. One of the things that we heard today a little bit was something I had not heard before, is that basically how hospitals are evaluated, how they look at patient care from pain management may actually cause physicians and hospitals to default in a manner that really may contribute to the problem and not lessen it. And so, one of the things you want to find out is whether or not regulations or administrations from other outside agencies may cause us to deal with a problem more severe than maybe it has to be. And it's really, I think, helpful to be able to get different perspectives from all continuums, whether they be from public health, mental health, law enforcement, and community activists, to be able to help us identify how it is that we can address the issue, but most importantly, how we can do it effectively.
Well, that continuum you talk about goes back to your key point, which is Alabama has the most prescriptions written for opioids in the United States.
Yeah, and one of the things, again, that we wish we could answer right now is why. I don't know that we have enough data to be able to figure it out. I think it's too simplistic to say it's simply because doctors are prescribing too many. There's a lot of factors that go into the availability of opioids to patients, and we need to be able to look for a variety of reasons what may be contributing to that problem. I think, but most importantly, we need to get beyond placing blame or assigning responsibility on others of what may have occurred in the past, and instead looked collectively among various disciplines about what we can do to be able to solve this problem going forward. It's not a singular solution. I think you're going to see a multifaceted approach, both law enforcement, public health, mental health, and community engagement. They're going to be responsible for us making progress on this issue.
Well, you've mentioned a couple of times today there is no single silver bullet. If there was, I guess we'd already be applying that, right?
And we'd see that nationally. I mean, this is not just Alabama. We are seeing it across the country. We see that there's a national commission in place to try to look at this particular topic. We've seen other states that have come forward with proposals in their respective communities and states. To some extent, we have the benefit of seeing what others have proposed and what may have worked and what hasn't. And so going forward, when we develop our strategic plan, we need to be looking at best practices. We need to be looking at innovative ways of dealing with this issue in Alabama. But most importantly, I think it is coming together and coalescing around a common goal and a common plan to reduce the overdose deaths in the state and to make sure that patient care is going appropriately.
Makes sense. Well, I'm going to switch gears slightly and bring it down to a Cullman County level, although I think this applies statewide. I get to deal with crimes, drug-related and not. The citizens who watch what goes on, I think, are generally positive towards law enforcement, police, sheriff's office. They watch people get arrested, they see the mugshots come up, and then within seemingly no time, these same individuals who have multiple offenses are back on the streets. And there's a lot of concern in my constituency out there is what's going on? How is this going to get fixed? And I know that's a multidimensional problem as well, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think you talk about a couple of different issues, one of which is really sort of pretrial incarceration for somebody that's been charged with a crime, and then beyond that is once somebody has been found guilty or pleads guilty, what we're doing in the nature of sentence and accountability at that point to find justice for victims and those who've been harmed. On the bond side, unless it's a capital offense, somebody has a right to be able to seek an appropriate bond. And one of the fights as prosecutors, like I did for 16 years in Marshall County, was to be able to try to make sure that we're keeping those who need to stay in jail in jail. And so one of the fights for Wilson Blaylock here and for Sheriff Gentry and others is to make sure that we identify those folks that we believe are a flight risk or otherwise a danger to the community getting out, and do everything that we can to be able to keep them in. And I have great confidence in both of them and being able to make those good decisions. But yet it continues to be an issue. There's always jail capacity that comes into play, and whether or not we have room for the folks that are there. But we got to make sure that we keep those who are violent offenders there as long as we can and try to hold them there until the time of trial. But then beyond that, I think one of the frustrations from people like me and others that have been in the criminal justice field for a long time is whether or not when we sentence somebody to a term of years, as to whether or not they're serving that term of years. When you toe to a victim and say that somebody is pleading guilty or a judge imposes a sentence of 15 years and they're getting a parole notice after 11 months, I think that's a problem. And so one of the changes that the legislature made a couple of years ago was in the area of probation and parole. I recognize and understand that Alabama has a prison system right now that is highly crowded. At the same time, we have to be looking out for public safety. And so one of the hopes for the legislature is they look at a prison plan, well, to be recognized that we need additional prison beds out there. We need to ensure that when we sentence somebody, that they have the capacity and the ability to hold those individuals to make sure that they are there to serve the sentence that the judges intended. Probation and parole has a vital role, and I obviously understand that. But for those who commit multiple offenses, have been problem children in the system for a long time, we need to make sure that there's accountability on the backside. I think that's something that the public demands.
Makes sense. I appreciate you talking to me. I know you've had a long day. Thanks for coming to Cullman. We appreciate it.
Very grateful to be here. Good to be in North Alabama.